Can you beat Batman Arkham City with 0 riddles? I promise this is an interesting question. G'day, chaps, is I, Clumputcher139. Arkham City has a lot of riddles. The most of the entire series, in fact, at a whopping 400. It's a lot of stuff to do, but the riddles a lot of people seem to forget about aren't the ones found on the map. Because this Riddler decided to give Batman a bit of extra work with the inclusion of physical challenges. These challenges are essentially little achievements for performing various moves as Batman throughout your playthrough, ranging from using a bunch of quickfire gadgets to gliding around the city really far, or simply being good at combat. Most of you probably ended up collecting a ton of these challenges without even realizing it. They're a real blink-and-you'll-miss-it achievement that usually pops up while you're doing something else, and seeing as Arkham City has just so many pop-ups, you probably ended up ignoring them after playing the game a while. Which is what led me to the idea for this challenge. I'm going to beat Arkham City without completing a single physical challenge. Or at least I hope so. I mean, I already recorded, so I obviously know the outcome, and I'm just wasting time here to extend the runtime with a really bad joke. Anyway, one last note before we get started is that it's actually incredibly easy to do this challenge because of how Riddler works. Riddler challenges only activate after you've collected a trophy or entered the church after Edward has taken over. This means that as long as you never start his quest, you never even unlock physical challenges in the first place. So, yes, the challenge can be won quite easily by simply ignoring him. Who would have thought? But because that doesn't make for an interesting video in the slightest, we're gonna bend the rules a little bit. After taking control of Batman, I will immediately glide down and collect a single trophy to activate Riddler's challenges. Technically, I could also wait until the church takeover, starting his quest then without collecting anything, but I didn't want to wait until all the way after the steel mill takeover to start the challenge. So, we collect a single trophy to get the challenges active, then go the rest of the game completely ignoring him. So with all that said, let's get to pissing off Edward.
You will regret trying to outsmart me. You will solve my riddles, and you will collect my trophies.
No. There are 2 challenges in particular that make this run difficult, and are what forced me into the new way of playing. Those being achieving a ×20 combo and achieving a 5x variation bonus. What this essentially boils down to is that I need to be terrible at this game in order to win. ×20 combo is not a difficult number to reach, especially when you're getting into the flow of the game and just start wailing on enemies left and right. This challenge forces us to keep a constant eye on the combo counter, always making sure it stays well below the target. And if it's ever about to reach said target, we gotta lose the combo. This could be done any number of ways. Running away like a little baby, dodging twice without vaulting over anyone, or simply getting hit. But my preferred method is simply dodging away and then countering the air. It's a near instantaneous reaction that leaves you with very little risk, because you can counter whatever enemy might be running up on you almost immediately after and start your combo back up. This was the way I tended to do things, at least when I was actually avoiding damage. However, the biggest hurdle of the run, to my surprise, was the variation bonus. Variation is never explained in any game to any capacity, so I'll do my best to break it down here. Every single move that Batman can perform increments the variation counter by 1. Punching, variation. Countering, variation. Special combo moves, variation. Evading over an enemy, you guessed it, variation. Everything increments the variation counter. This is intended to be a reward for varying up your combat encounters, giving you a bigger XP bonus the more interesting moves you perform in combat. However, it's really bad for this challenge, because it means that we can only do 4 different moves for every combat encounter from start to finish. So we need to strategize and plan ahead for every single encounter we're going to face, only using necessary moves with no room for error. This could mean going an entire combat encounter without dodging or countering because we need the extra variation slot for an evade or aerial attack. It's a very tricky balancing act that, unfortunately, you won't know if you succeeded in until you've already failed. Most of the early game is pretty uneventful. Since there are only basic enemies until we reach the museum, we can handle just about everyone the same way. Attack, counter, dodge if you need to, build up an up combo for a takedown, break the combo so that you don't go over 20, repeat. It's pretty simple, if a little stressful making sure you don't go over the mark, and forced me into a lot of conditioning to make sure I didn't go back to my old ways. I play this game so much, I needed to constantly remind myself to not use everything I know, because a large section of challenges are dedicated to using quickfire gadgets in combat. This will come much more into play later in the game, but even right now it's tedious, because I'm so used to spamming Batarangs at every foreseeable opportunity, especially as a quick finisher at the end of combat. But for the most part, it's not too bad, and there's even a bit of leeway, because you need to use the gadgets multiple times in order to increment the challenge, so I'm able to make a few mistakes as long as I don't make too many. The first section that really mattered for this run was the introductory combat section in the steel mill, because of another challenge that we needed to keep track of: countering thrown objects. We can't throw these crates back at these guys because that will increment the challenge. Instead, we have to dodge out of the way or even let them hit us instead of countering, which overall made this encounter a little more difficult as I had to keep track of like 5 separate things at once to succeed. It wasn't that hard, but certainly felt overwhelming at the time. This was followed up by our first Predator encounter, where we have a whole host of new challenges to keep track of. Chief among them are 3: inverted takedown, knockout smashes, and smoke bombs. We can't do any of these things. Inverted takedowns are completely off the table, as the challenge only asks for a single one to be done, which removes an entire move from our arsenal, and frankly one of the best ones as well. Knockout smashes are a little more lenient, as the game requires us to do 5 of them for a challenge. So if there's an emergency that would otherwise get us killed, we can do it, but it must be used sparingly. Overall though, this challenge just slowed me down a bit and didn't really hamper the difficulty much at all. Mostly because silent takedowns are just that broken. Smoke, however, is just plain mean. We essentially can't use smoke bombs at all throughout the game, because it could just accidentally activate a challenge. The hardest one, of course, is not getting a takedown in smoke, which was one of my primary ways of clearing out Predator sections fast in speedruns. At this point, my only options are environment takedowns and silent takedowns for Predator. And we have to make sure not to accidentally activate it in combat as well, because of another mean challenge, making enemies hit one another in the smoke. Basically, to play it safe, I literally did not use smoke bombs at all in this challenge, because it could lead to some of the enemies attacking one another, or one of the guys going down in the smoke without me knowing it. It's a whole thing. I just didn't use it for the sake of keeping things consistent. These challenges forced me to play through the Smelting Chamber in a completely different manner than normal. Not going for this enemy with the super obvious and very necessary inverted takedown, instead forcing me to take him out silently, then completely ignoring this perfect situation for a smoke bomb on the 2 guys in the office, forcing me to wait for them to leave before I could take them out normally. It was painful not going for these perfect setups, but I had to do it for the challenge. This eventually led me back to the entryway for the Mr. Hammer fight, which I figured would be the biggest roadblock imaginable. I mean, the whole point of Mr. Hammer is that you wail on him all the way to a ×50 combo and spam the Bat Swarm to keep him from attacking. Not only did I have to not wail on him to keep my combo low, but I needed to not use the Bat Swarm so I didn't overindulge in variation. So, what was I to do? Well, just keep swinging and hoping and praying. I did the unthinkable and used my single upgrade point at this point in the game to buy armor. then just kinda went for it. I unleashed my flurry of blows against Hammer, then, upon gaming my special combo move, would use a takedown before Hammer had a chance to attack me, since combo moves make you invincible. Then I'd do it again to take out another enemy before dropping the combo so I wouldn't go over 20, rinse and repeat, taking who knows how many blows to the head in the process because I suck, before eventually taking down Mr. Hammer and winning the fight, barely keeping my variation under 5, and cutting it pretty close with my combo a few times. But I got it done and could move on. After an embarrassing death, of course, but we don't need to talk about that. The next good chunk of gameplay was a whole lot of nothing. But it is worth mentioning that it did still impact the challenge. Because one of the less obvious physical challenges that we need to keep track of is the gliding challenge. Most of our traversal challenges don't come into effect. We'd have to deliberately go out of our way to even have a chance at doing them, like the dive bomb, gliding over water, etc. However, one of them is a lot harder to avoid, and that's gliding for 150 meters uninterrupted. Believe me, it's a lot easier than it sounds to accidentally do when you're getting into it. So we've even got to play basic overworld movement safe to ensure we don't accidentally proc the challenge. Anytime I needed to go long distances in the world, I'd always make sure to take a walk stop on top of a building to reset the counter. On top of that, I didn't even bother collecting the grapnel boost because that would just give me access to the tougher 250 meter challenge, as well as a few challenges locked behind it specifically. So my movement isn't exactly what you'd call graceful anymore, but it was necessary in order to complete these physical challenges, so slow movement it is. The next difficult section isn't until we gain full access to the museum, as all the combat and predator sections on the way are ridiculously easy to get through. Upon entering the museum proper, we have our first encounter with armored enemies, which pose their own challenge. The intended way to take them down is with a beatdown, stunning them with the cape, then wailing on them for like 20 punches. However, we can't actually do this. Not only would doing so be difficult to keep under the combo and variation count, but there's also a challenge for defeating an enemy with a beatdown. So we can never go into the flurry of blows animation and finish an enemy without also proccing the Riddler challenge. The speedrun strat for taking these guys out isn't much better because that requires you to use the wreck gun to knock them down, then finish them with a ground takedown. And as a reminder, we can't use the wreck gun because we can't use quickfire gadgets in combat, both for the challenges and the variation. Doing so would also run the risk of accidentally knocking him into one of his allies when we do this, which is another challenge. And unlike the quickfire one, this doesn't have any leeway, so we definitely don't want to accidentally do this. So what are we left with? Well, there is one other way to take these guys out, and that's with a super stun. This move, which is usually reserved for taking down titans, can also be used to knock over armored enemies into the same prone state as they would be as shooting them with the wreck gun. So we can use this state to knock them over and use a ground takedown, keeping us just under the variation cap. Since we also have to take out these other enemies, we're required to punch, which is 1, plus 2 for both the regular stun and super stun, and a 4th for the ground takedown. Crazy how a mere 3 enemies can put us right on the verge of failing the challenge because of this stupid variation requirement. Though it should be noted that the rest of the armored enemies in larger combat sections were really easy to take out because we could just build up a special combo takedown and use it on them. It's really the guys in small areas that we have to worry about, which happens to be all the armored guys that we encountered in the museum, so that's fun. Either way, moving further into the museum, we have our next major roadblock, the Gladiator Pit. This section is normally a complete breeze, because you can just wail on all these enemies and be done with it in less than a minute with critical strikes. However, with this challenge, we definitely can't. First things first, before going into the pit, I went ahead and used my upgrade points to grab critical strikes, as well as the special combo boost. I didn't want to get them originally because I figured having them would make me go over the 20 combo limit too often, but turns out getting them was definitely the right play. cause this allowed me to rack up special combo takedowns a lot easier and get rid of these enemies super quickly. The first wave came and went like nothing happened. I did reset once because I took a lot of unnecessary damage on my first try, but after that it was absolutely no issue. The second wave, however, would absolutely be an issue because of the Titan. Firstly, we can mitigate the variation counter by using some explosive gel instead of the super stun. Since we haven't started up a combo, the gel won't count toward the quickfire challenge. Though, it might still count towards variation, I'm not sure. That aside, we use it to stun him and then punch him to get through the first phase. That's not the problem. The problem is that this Titan is our one and only required use of the back ride. It's the only time that we have to use this in the whole game, but doing so will absolutely destroy our combo count if we're not careful. Every single hit with the Titan will increase the combo, so we need to mitigate that ASAP, especially since we're already at a ×8 combo by the time we initiate the back ride after attacking the Titan. Immediately upon getting on the Titan's back, we use the charge move to get as far away from these enemies as possible and slam into the wall, thankfully not incrementing the counter. I then spam the button to do it again, but for some reason, the Titan turns around and charges straight into the horde of enemies behind me. Thankfully, this ends up leaving the combo counter just under the limit, and since I used 2 special moves, the Titan then throws us off, so I just run for my life to drop the combo because I was already at ×15. I'm able to get through the rest of the enemies pretty easily the same way that I did in Phase 1, though I opt not to dodge roll at all so as to keep my variation counter low, just in case the gel from earlier counted. After taking all of them out, at literally 1 HP, I make sure to drop my combo by running away from the Titan, then run in and use gel again to stun him and take him out, thankfully keeping me under the combo and variation count for the entire encounter. It was a very close call, but we did it. Definitely one of the most tense moments in the whole run, but certainly doable. Pretty soon after was the battle against Mr. Sickle, which we treated exactly the same as against Mr. Hammer earlier. There were a few close calls, and I had to resist my urges to throw a Batarang at this perfectly placed propane tank this enemy was about to throw, but we were able to get it first try with no issues, aside from a pretty major concussion. The Predator section following this didn't add anything difficulty-wise, so we move on all the way to the Grundy fight, which also didn't impact this challenge at all. Now you're probably thinking that it has to because of the quickfire gel that you need to use to take out the generators. But don't worry, because we never rack up a combo in this fight. And the challenge specifically stipulates that you need to use the gadget in a combo, otherwise it just doesn't count, just like we did with the Titan earlier. So we're free to use as much gel as we want in this fight, and whatever other gadgets we feel like for that matter, and it won't impact the challenge at all. Even the beatdown against Grundy's ribcage doesn't matter, because the combo counter only goes up to about 15 with it, nowhere near the required 20. There's also the beatdown against Penguin after defeating Grundy, which might pose the same problem and also increment the beatdown counter. But even if it did, which I'm pretty sure it wouldn't count, we have an easy solution. Penguin also goes down upon using a super stun on him, so there's no attacking required. And with that, we're already about halfway through the game with very few issues. It frankly could only get easier from here, right? Well, probably, because the next good chunk of gameplay is pretty uneventful until we make it to the Predator section in Wonder City, which, even then, isn't too hard, but does introduce us to a new piece of the challenge, that being the jammers. We're not allowed to deactivate them with the rec gun, because that would proc a challenge. So if they show up, we just have to deal with them the old-fashioned way, which I quite easily do in this section, but only because it's a really easy section. Either way, this leads us to Wonder City proper, and our first encounter with ninjas. It's not that big of a deal right now, but I did need to recondition myself to not use beatdowns against them since that would proc the challenge. Instead, I had to take it slow and just attack, counter, and take down. And I was able to get through all of them without issue. That included the ones in the demon trials as well. eventually leading me all the way to the Ra's al Ghul fight. This fight was mostly easy, though I did have to be cautious of my combo count, as it did get dangerously high a few times. But like the Grundy fight earlier, the use of the rec gun here doesn't matter because it's not in the middle of a combo. The beatdown against Ra's also doesn't count because we're not actually finishing an enemy off, merely progressing phases. Now, if I had done it to one of his minions, it probably would have counted. But since I was careful and didn't do that, I added absolutely nothing to any of my counters. The only truly difficult part was not countering the dog pile attack, because there are 20 enemies attacking you, and as such that would instantly put me up to a times 20 combo. So instead I just had to take the hit, which actually did so much less damage than I thought it would be. Like, they really didn't intend for anyone to ever get hit by this, because I'm pretty sure it did less damage than a regular attack from Ra's. Pretty weird, but whatever, it wasn't bad. What was bad was the fact that I did have to reset once in phase 2, because I got too into the fight and went over the combo count. But aside from that, the fight was no issue. We beat him up, take him down, and unlock a useless gadget that also unlocks a challenge. But seeing as nobody ever uses the reverse Batarang, its physical challenge will not be impacting the rest of this run. With that, we can head out back to the surface, passing by a few difficult areas along the way. First is the Predator section back in the subway terminal, which is normally skipped with a smoke bomb and completely ignored. However, since I don't want to risk activating the smoke bomb challenges, I go ahead and do the room normally, taking the enemies down until the two in this room leave, allowing me to ignore them and move on to a just as difficult combat section. This is the section that introduces shields, which means that we need to once again be extra careful of our variation, since both the cape stun and the aerial attack will both be counted as separate moves. And we definitely can't beat this section without punching and special combo takedowns. We've used up all of our allowed variation, so we need to flat out forego dodging and countering altogether. Thankfully, since we're able to take out the one armored guy with a surprise takedown, we don't have to worry about him, but all the others are definitely a problem. I end up getting all the guys down, but it is not easy, as I basically just have to keep taking hit after hit instead of just getting out of the way. The one advantage of getting hit is that my combo resets every time I do, so I never have to worry about keeping track of it because I know it'll almost always be back to 0 in a second or two. So while this section is a challenge, it's much more manageable than you'd think. Especially because I wasted all of my upgrade points getting my armor up to the max. Following that string of difficulty is a string of complete ease, as next we have the Mr. Freeze fight. Oh, wait, there's a quick combat encounter outside, let me just take care of that. Alright, now then, Freeze has no impact on this challenge, just like the rest of the bosses. We just take him down like we would any other playthrough of the game, as none of the physical challenges can be performed on him to begin with. This gives us the Freeze Blast, a gadget that we will absolutely never use because of how many challenges are associated with it. Not only do we have the typical quick-firing combat stuff, but we've also got the Ice Smash takedown and knocking a frozen guy over with a Batarang, which means we basically just can't use them in Predator either. Which really sucks because this has become one of my go-to gadgets and now I just can't use it. We head on over to the steel mill to confront Joker and go through a pretty easy Predator section as we do so. Thankfully, these guys split up really often, so it's not all too difficult to get them one after another with silent takedowns. This then leads us into the steel mill proper, which is incredibly easy, only giving us a single combat section worth talking about for a single sentence because it was also incredibly easy. That then brings us to the Predator section following it back in the Smelting Chamber. But it's also as simple as doing a bunch of silent takedowns and then they're suddenly all defeated. It really is that simple sometimes. The real troublesome section of the steel mill is all the way at the end, in the absolutely hellish Joker's funhouse. Easily the largest combat section in the entire game with the absolute toughest enemies in an all-out onslaught that never lets up. And yet I still beat it on my second try, only because I reset on my first after taking too much damage too early. The main strat was to go in for a few attacks, get a takedown, or even two, drop the combo, and hope to God I'm not going over the variation cap. I try to get as many enemies as I can as early as possible before Abramovich drops and screws everything up. By the time he does, I basically play run and gun for the rest of combat, jumping in to deal a bit of damage and get a takedown or two before either getting hit or running away like a baby. Eventually, I've whittled down the forces enough to start focusing on Mr. Hammer, and reintegrate the strategy from earlier fight again. Beat him up for a few hits, use a special combo move to take out an enemy, and use the invincibility frames, repeat until way too close to 20 combo, dip out, and eventually finish him off. The Titan throws a bit of a wrench into the plan since we can't really deal with him at all without seriously racking up the combo, so we have to do our best to completely ignore it until it's the last enemy aside from Joker. When the Titan is last, you can instantly take him out, no backriding required. And this is what we want, because otherwise we're gonna risk racking up way too much combo. So we do our best to work around him while taking out the other enemies and Mr. Hammer, then just punch Joker out of your way so you can use the same gel strat from earlier to stun the Titan and beat him up, finishing the fight with one final punch to Joker. And thus wraps up the hardest section in the entire game, which frankly wasn't all that hard because I spent so many upgrade points filling up my armor. And after all that, honestly the challenge is basically over. There's only one more combat section against Tiger in the processing chamber, and while I did accidentally go over my allotted 5 variation once, I just reloaded the checkpoint and tried again, getting it easily on the second try. It's amazing what you can do with just punches and takedowns. The Predator section in Wonder City wasn't any more difficult, just a series of silent takedowns until all the enemies were taken care of. Wonder Tower wasn't exactly silent or ideal at all, but I still got it on my second try after some BS sightlines from the guards caused me to reset once. And while it was a little scary at times, it was just because the section was difficult and I was playing on hard mode, not because of the challenge at all. That just leaves the snipers around the theater, which all went down super easily since you can get them all with silent takedowns. And then all that was left was Clayface. And just like the other bosses, he doesn't affect this challenge in the slightest, because we're using the freeze blasts, but not in the middle of a combo. We do need to technically be a little careful in the final phase to not go over the combo limit, but seeing as getting hit by these claymen hurts as much as getting hit by a wet paper towel, it's not difficult by any means. And with that, the run is completed. You can in fact beat Batman Arkham City with 0 riddles. I mean, if you don't count the one I needed to collect to activate the challenge, but whatever. It doesn't count. Don't at me. And that'll do it for this video, chaps. Thanks for watching. This was certainly a unique way to experience the game. Not only did I need to pay extremely close attention to every single action I was taking in the game, but I had to deliberately handicap myself while I was doing it, making the whole game even harder. I could honestly recommend this run. It put a new spin on the game that I hadn't experienced in a while. Definitely better than the alternative, which you should totally watch, by the way. It's a pretty great video. Do it, please, I'm desperate. But with all that being said, please do all of the YouTube stuff, because I think I gave Eddie a hernia with all my obvious flopping around. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later, chaps.
What? No. You'll pay for this, Batman.
You sure this thing won't work?
No. But there's no point in letting him know that, is there?